Hello, everyone, to another episode of Coffee with Gable. Today, we're going to talk about employee experience and what works in a flexible workspace. Excited to have everyone here with me. We'll trickle in. While everyone trickling in, just a few housekeeping items and Zoom tips. Make sure that you change your settings to everyone if you want to, comment and see what everyone else is commenting as well. We do have a Q&A section, so please feel free to engage in that as well. And we will make sure to send the recording to everyone who attended here. Great. So let's dive right in. So I'm very excited to have our incredible speakers here with us. I will let you introduce yourselves. I'll start with Erica.
Hello, I'm Erica Hurd. I lead real estate and workplace at Niantic. We're a mobile gaming and AR platform company headquartered in San Francisco. I live in San Francisco and work out of our San Francisco office, which is luckily the Ferry Building. So amazing place to work.
Amazing. Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca. I lead the Work Innovation Lab at Asana. Asana is a leading work management platform that helps teams work smarter and connects the goals that you set at the top of your organization to the strategic projects and cross-functional projects and portfolios all the way down to the individual tasks. And then the Work Innovation Lab is our internal think tank where we think a lot about the future of work and helping executives and leaders navigate all the changes that we're seeing in the world of work. And to do that, we partner very closely with our customers at Asana and also a leading group of academic experts.
Amazing. And Gianna.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Gianna Driver. I'm the CHRO of a cybersecurity company called Exabeam. We're also headquartered in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I oversee our people and places functions.
Amazing. And let's get to know each other. So whoever is here with us, please comment with your name, your role, your company, and where you're from, where you're dialing in from. We've had, honestly, all around the globe participants before, so I'm excited to see who is here today. Great. And while we do that, just a quick overview about Gable. We are an all-in-one platform to manage your hybrid and remote teams. And really the way that it means is actually we have a full suite of products to support your hybrid and remote teams, whether this is an on-demand solution, where we offer over 7,000 co-working spaces on demand for remote employees to work from, ability to manage your HQ, desk reservation and booking in any space that you have, visitor management and event orchestration as well, for whether those are on-sites and off-sites. And all of it is underpinned by data and insight to really help you define your workplace strategy moving forward and refine it. So, and of course, stick around for a special offer from Gable until the end. So let's start with a poll. What is your company's current workplace strategy? Let it launch. One second. Right. Perfect. Okay. What a distributed bunch. Interesting. So fully remote, hybrid, different types of hybrid, 0 in office, and a mixture. Great. Okay. Very, very much top of mind there. So the reason that we usually do those polls is one, to understand, where you're at, right? And I do want to say that you're not alone. RTO or hybrid policies are quite a struggle. We've recently done a research with several Stanford professors. One of them is Nick Bloom, if you're familiar with, about different RTO policies. And this has been an astonishing result. We've surveyed over 5,000 US employees that basically we've seen a range between 0 RTO policies to 5, right? So think about this, how crazy this is, a company that has so many different iterations, right? But the reason for it is not that it means that it's a failure. It actually means that there is an iterative process of what actually works for companies, which is a good thing. And we're going to talk about this, of course, but one of the things that are important to show, and this is from a study done by BCG about the workplace strategies, it shows the huge shift, right, from prior to COVID, having everyone fully in person, right, to having a spectrum and a bell curve. With the majority of companies, and we've actually seen this in the polls today, majority of them are actually hybrid. And hybrid again means a lot, and we're going to talk about it. What type of hybrid are those? Are the key moments? Are the structured hybrid? I've heard it all. I'm sure our audience as well. And our speakers. And I think that's part of it, that every company needs to choose what works for itself. And that's both, a great power, but also a great responsibility in that sense. So we're going to talk about this as well. So I'll start with Erica. You've had quite a lot of transformation, I would say, leading the workforce, both in terms of huge growth, then restructuring, COVID. Walk me through your workplace strategy prior to COVID, how it is today, and what made it like that.
Yeah, well, I feel like we're the company in the statistics. So we've announced 2 RTO policies, like between 2020 and, I mean, maybe it's more like 3, but 2 ones that kind of went into practice. And it was exactly what you said, like iteration and learning. Is what caused us to change it. But pre-COVID, we were in the office 5 days a week. I think being kind of a creative company, like on the gaming side, it was really in-person collaboration was really important. When COVID happened, I think our CEO, was pretty adamant that we were going to go back to the office. I think like early COVID, we didn't know what that was going to look like. It was like, are we going to go back with the walls, like the plexi walls, and everybody's going to be back? And I think similar to a lot of tech companies, we grew a lot during the pandemic. So when we were remote, we doubled in size. 2020 and 2021 were really big years for Niantic. All while we were mostly remote, we knew we wanted to go back to the office. So I think, one key strategy was to remain flexible. So that was probably the thing we really focused on. And I think that was from delivering space. When you're designing out space and you don't really know what the future of work's going to look like, it's going to be different, but you don't know what you need. Just trying to work with your architects to kind of be flexible. And then also like on the real estate portfolio, trying to, create optionality when you're signing leases and making sure that you have kind of flexibility there. We ended up going into a neighborhood model, which has worked really well. So that was kind of our first with first hybrid, getting away from dedicated desking, which was a challenge, especially for like our big engineering teams. But I think it's been, now that people are used to it, it's pretty successful. I would say we're structured hybrid. So we have signed days in the office. I think our leadership team would love to see people in more. And we have benefits kind of that are tied to that. If you come in more, you get free parking. There's bonuses you would get if you came in more. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's,
and
I don't want to take up too much
one
time.
one that's amazing. One, you talked about 2 iterations. So I would love to hear a little bit more later on. What does it mean, like 2 iterations, basically?
Do you want to hear it now or you want me to wait?
Yeah, let's.
Okay, so I think our first one was kind of, I think what a lot of people tried, like hybrid, you can pick your days. We kind of did like a soft encouragement. We're like, hey, we expect you to be in the office. I think what happened was we were tracking attendance, we're tracking badge swipes. we saw a slight increase and it really like leveled out. Like basically most employees weren't complying with 2 days. Also we were having challenges. People were coming into the office and they were like missing each other. So I say you had choice. We allowed every team to decide. So we had, and like they were small, they went down to like the small teams. And what was happening was like if you were on the UX team, you would maybe come in on Tuesday, Wednesday, and then you would miss your engineering teams that were there Monday, Thursday, or whatever. And that wasn't working. And people were coming into kind of like a dead office because it was spreading. And so that was, I think we're getting a lot of complaints about why am I coming in? They're so stupid. Like, and just like the miss of people, it wasn't buzzy. Like it kind of did feel like you were coming into these like ghost offices. So we did make the switch to structured hybrid. I think it's worked really well. We have a core day on Wednesdays. The whole company comes in on Wednesdays. I will say Wednesdays are the I think the most fun, probably maybe the most unproductive in terms of focused work. But I think people talk a lot and it's fun. And I think it's like kind of really improved our culture and like the just kind of the sentiment of like Niantics, we do catering. That's usually when we do our big events. That's our all hands day. There's a lot of energy in the office. On the real estate side, it's hard. Like it's hard to have the entire company there in one day. And it's kind of hard to communicate that up to leadership that it's like, you're gonna have the whole company there in one day. Like you can't shrink that much because you still have to accommodate all these people. And then the second day is a team day, but it's a bigger, we went up to the like kind of exec level. So if you're on the finance team, this is your day. If you're on, we make Pokemon Go, like you're on this day. Most of our teams are Monday through Thursday. I don't think any team has picked Friday. So I think it's worked pretty well for us. And then, like I said, we have benefits tied. We have like in some of our leases, like parking included. So we struggled kind of how to deal with that. We used to give free parking away in a lot of our suburban locations, and now we don't. Like you have to get a dedicated desk, you have to come in 3 days a week. We do validate that quarterly. And if you get a hub desk in the locations where we have parking, we'll give you parking. So there are kind of like, I guess, carrots. And okay, I was soft. We introduced what I heard somebody call it the consequence model. So we track badges. We started doing that early. I definitely before a lot of the big tech companies started. It was very unpopular at first, I think, but I think it's worked. Like I think now that people are used to it, it's like an expectation. They understand what they need to do. We recently made a shift to make it a little bit more flexible. Before they were looking at it week by week and like you had to be in 2 days a week. There was flexibility on the days, but you had to be in 2 weeks, 2 days a week. And if you didn't meet that, you ended up like on a list and you got an email from HR, which HR, like people team didn't like it. Nobody really liked it. So now we've kind of stretched to like quarterly that you can make up days. It started April 1st, so we're 10 days in. Like, I think people are excited about the flexibility. So we'll see how that kind of translates. I think one concern is, are people going to try to game the system and like load, like come in the first 4 weeks and then not come in? Like, we don't know yet. Like, that's not the expectation, but we'll see. So,
Erica, I'm curious, what's the consequence if people don't come in?
So we have tied it to promotions and bonuses. So I think if you're up for promotion, they're looking at lists and making sure you're compliant. I think especially when you get up to the higher manager levels, I think there's like, you better be coming in, setting an example for your team. I think there's also on the people team side in our handbook, there's like, it's kind of like 3 strikes. To be honest, I don't think anybody's been let go for it, but it's a pretty serious, like you get a pretty serious email from your people team, your people partner, and it's copying your boss and your exec leader. And it's kind of like, you need to come in. So I don't think I think usually when there's like really severe attendance problems, there's other problems. So we do have remote employees too, which is a little, I think has made it trickier, to be honest. Like I think the in-person people feel sometimes slighted by that, but we don't really hire remote employees. These are kind of just like people that are grandfathered in.
That's fascinating. Honestly, it's so interesting, and I'm sure Gianna wanted to ask you, because you are leading both the people and places, and I'm sure would love to hear a little bit about this. This is, I would say, a new thing, at least from what I see, for HR. Can you share a little bit about, how does Exabeam look at this in terms of real estate and people aspect? How does your leadership affected real estate, and what takes into account there?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying, with regard to the people and places aspect, part of our thought process behind having real estate facilities, global workplaces be part of the HR people team, is that your physical space, your workspace, workplace, has a lot to do with your employee experience. And so, we tied that together underneath the people umbrella because we want to have a consistent, coherent experience, no matter if somebody is remote, hybrid, in the office, et cetera. I think it's probably helpful maybe if I provide a little bit of context around what we do, so that we can ground ourselves, and then Lisa, I'll answer your questions. You'll probably have to repeat them to me because I'll probably forget them. So pre-pandemic, we were your traditional kind of in-person, in the office type of workplace. And like many tech companies during the pandemic, we hired a lot of people remotely. And then, post-pandemic, we have an approach that we call remote-friendly hybrid, meaning we still have many fabulous colleagues who are remote, meaning like they live in Iowa or places where we don't have an office at all. And so what we do is we say, okay, if you live near an office, then similar to what Erica was saying, we've got carrots. We have various incentives to encourage you to come into the office. It's not required. You could live next door to the office and never come into the office, and that's okay at Exabeam. But we hope that the various programs and things that we do will encourage people to come in. For us, Wednesdays is kind of like the day when we do all of our programming. And we have found that the simple fact of offering free lunches makes a lot of people interested in coming in on those days. So, catering days for us are on Wednesdays. Wednesdays, we also do happy hours. So some of our employees have said when they come into the office, not only is there a big, spread for lunch, but then a few hours later, there's the whole big spread for happy hour. So it's kind of like, feasting on Wednesdays. It's when we have a lot of our ERG programming as well. So, just that cultural aspect that Erica was talking about, I concur. Like we've found that to be really, really important for fostering the connective tissue between employees. What we do from a programming standpoint is we know that, a lot of our employees are fully remote, meaning, again, they don't live near an office. And because we want to have a consistent experience, what we try to do is offer opportunities for our remote folks to come into the HQ office or in an office near them, and or sometimes just meeting up, as a group together. So we will help to subsidize and or sponsor those, geo-specific gatherings. I feel like you asked other questions, Lisa, and now I'm forgetting what questions you asked so that I can answer them.
I think one, you don't have like a mandated days, correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct. Yeah.
Right?
No, it's fully.
And why did you choose not to have that? Basically, like and Erica also talked about flexibility, but we can, we have two people. You talked about flexibility, and those are already two different approaches. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, number one, we saw that our workers were really happy being remote and flexible. So for us, it was philosophically about trust. It was about employee retention. It was about employee experience. And so because people proved that they were able to be fully productive in this hybrid remote environment, our thought process was, why should we shackle them into an office? A, they're going to be really upset about that. We were concerned about attrition. We were concerned about employee engagement. And we said, let's take the reverse approach here and try to create an environment with various different incentives and attraction as opposed to being, more punitive. So that was our approach. And I will preface and say that I personally don't think there is a silver bullet, singular right way to do this. I think what's important is that we, as leaders in organizations, are just really clear about what we do and what our policy, is around hybrid, remote, flexible, in person. And then ultimately, it's up to employees to decide if that works for them or not. And so again, like I love that we're all coming together with these different perspectives, right? So yeah, again, I don't think there's a right or wrong.
Totally agree. Totally agree. And Rebecca, I'm interested to hear, one, if you can share how the Work Innovation Lab was created, right? And the second piece I would say is, what do you see? What data are you looking at? What questions are you looking to solve or answer?
Sure. And I just wanted to build on this conversation because I think it's so important that both Erica and Gianna have illustrated the intentionality behind these practices. And we do study, how we collaborate and how we work together at the Work Innovation Lab. And one of the things, unfortunately, we see across the board is there's a lack of clarity and certainty from many organizations in terms of even what is your hybrid policy and why was it created? And one of the things we see as well is the biggest predictor of whether employees are content with their hybrid work policy is understanding that why and that intentionality, even more so than what the actual policy is. And I think it's really important and admirable that both of you have illustrated that intentionality. And then in terms of the Work Innovation Lab, we started it about 18 months ago. The pandemic was nearing the end, and we were seeing this hunger from our customers and prospective customers in terms of wanting to better understand how the world of work was changing. We were seeing all these different changes on the horizon, not just in terms of hybrid and distributed work, but we were also seeing the emergence of AI and different technologies. And we wanted to create something that could help our customers understand beyond the Asana product, how they should be thinking about designing their workplace. And we feel very strongly that, we need to be strategic partners to our customers in helping them navigate all the changes that are happening in terms of the world of work. And what is really different about the lab is we partner very closely with academic experts. I have spent many years in academia and have felt this disconnect between the great academic research, especially in terms of how we work together and how we collaborate. Lisa, you mentioned Nick Bloom and some of his amazing research that's, goes back decades and really does help us understand the science of how we work, how we should be structuring remote and hybrid environments. And I felt this disconnect between that great academic research and then what I was seeing on the ground in practice from organizations in general. And so we really tried to develop this think tank on the premise that we need to bridge those worlds and leverage the great academic research in a way that is more digestible and more impactful for executives to make data-driven decisions. Often executives rely so heavily on their gut and impulse and intuition to make important decisions. We see this with hybrid work too, where often the strategies aren't grounded in data or research. They're grounded by preference and often the preference of the leadership team. And we need to do a better job at grounding in the data and research. So our core research areas include collaboration, teamwork, really understanding the science of collaboration, teamwork, technology. How is technology transforming the ways in which we work? AI is a big focus right now. And really understanding the intersection between technology and humans. We know that those two factors are intimately related. They influence each other, and technology is never inherently good or bad. It's about how we adopt it, and again, that intentionality behind it. So thinking a lot about how do we better understand that interplay so that we can design our organizations to be more resilient and more adaptable.
And Rebecca, maybe one quick follow-up. I think it's fascinating, but were there any data points that you found that surprised you, or things that you would like to share that might be relevant with the audience?
I think there are several. One of the most, I think, concerning findings that we see in the research is something that one of our research partners calls digital exhaustion. This idea that right now workers, and we saw this through the pandemic, where as we lost in many cases that face-to-face connection, executives tended to overinvest in technologies and overinvest in technologies in silos, where the marketing team was developing their own technology stack, the IT team was developing a different technology stack, and the teams and the technologies were disconnected. And I think as a result of that, what we're seeing now more than ever is that about 2/3 of workers say they're exhausted by the technologies that they feel they need to use to do their jobs. And so I think it's a real opportunity right now as we think about these hybrid remote work policies to also think about what is our technology strategy and investing in those technologies that bring different groups together, support those cross-functional collaborative use cases, and not invest in more tools, because what we're seeing now is technology overload, technology exhaustion, and so much so that about 1/3 of workers right now say that they're considering, or they're not opposed to choosing a different organization to work at if they have a better strategy around collaboration tools and technology strategy in general. And I think increasingly what we see is the employee experience is a digital employee experience, and we need to be thinking about that digital strategy alongside all the different other strategies related to hybrid and remote work.
That's fascinating and scary, to be honest, to hear. And Erica, I wanted to come back to you. You mentioned a few things that really were really interesting to dive deeper a little bit. You mentioned at the end of the day, you know, if it was up to the leadership, everyone would come to the office, right? Like that's that, and we see this and we hear this all the time. That's probably the preference. But at the end of the day, you did do 2 iterations, right? Can you walk me through why did you decide on those iterations? I think, and from what I hear, there is some collaboration with the people team, with the employee themselves, how those decisions are being made.
Yeah, so I think like and I feel like there's a question in the chat that kind of relates to this, so I'll try to take that in. I feel like, to be clear on leadership, our CEO. It's like our CEO was adamant. I would not say that our entire leadership team was aligned on that in the beginning. Like, I think we had a wide variety of opinions.
Okay.
For example, our engineering leader really felt strongly that we needed to lean into remote work and that would help us grow our workforce and it would help us be strategic. And I think that's kind of how we ended up with that like really like custom solution where it was kind of like every exec leader could decide and it could roll down. And it really was a mismatch. I think there was like, first of all, people not coming in on certain days, not seeing people. There was also like concerns about like, you would hear like, that's not fair. That like, I mean, we had like, I think Pokemon Go was coming in like 2 days a week. And then we had like another game team that had decided they were going to come in 1 week a quarter. So like we had these like variety of policies. They weren't really being managed at like the corporate level because it was too hard. Like, I mean, that was like an unreasonable expectation for the people team or the workplace team. I should clarify, I report up through finance. So I do think sometimes that affects how like what's important to real estate. But anyways, so we tried that and I think it was just confusing. I remember our CEO being like, well, what days is, you know, blah, blah, blah team here. And it was kind of like nobody could really tell you. Like, I mean, it was too much to keep track of. And it just didn't work. Like it just wasn't working. I think it was I think that the intentionality, like to what Rebecca said, we did not answer that question very well the first time we did it. It was kind of like, you need to do this because your boss told you to do it. I think the flexibility we decided to do that for a variety of reasons, like not alignment at the exec level. And then also like, I think that if you think back to when those were happening, that was like the talent war, you were worried about attrition. I think the conversation changed drastically. Like, I think now we're probably in a different conversation. We decided to make the shift. I'm trying to think of when we did it. It wasn't fall of 20, it must have been fall of 22 was when we shifted our policy. And so we gave a few months notice and we had said that it was a cross-functional team that came together. I think one thing we really realized was we had to have alignment and we had to kind of define who the decision maker was. I think one of the problems last time was like every exec thought they were a decision maker and just didn't work. And I think honestly, our execs weren't coming in. Like I remember sitting down with our CEO being like, why isn't anybody coming in? I'm like, well, your direct reports are never here. Like, how can you expect the engineers to come in when the engineering leader's never here? So like they had to kind of walk the walk, and I think he kind of had to communicate what he wanted. And I think often my job is to, I think he has a pretty strong vision, and it's to kind of like create that vision for him. Like there's some workplace leaders that I feel like could kind of influence. I think he had a very strong perspective and kind of has the whole time. And so it was kind of trying to figure out how that worked. Second time, we were much more intentional. I think we kind of answered the why. People might not have liked the answer to the why. And I think some people left because of it. But I think we did answer it. I think he really believed that, or still believes, like in person is where the magic happens. Like, I remember him saying, like, you're not going to change the world over Zoom. Like I think on the gaming side, pretty creative. But also on the platform side, we are trying to create something that's never been created before. And we're competing against these really big companies. And so it was kind of this is a critical moment for Niantic, and we all have to be working on this together. So that was like kind of the shift. I think when we did the shift, it was a different cross-functional team that came together. It was a smaller team. We were more empowered. Like I think the second time to make decisions and make recommendations, like I think he was like, you need to go figure out what the best model was. It was a mix of people that had been involved in the first round and then also some new voices. So I think it was interesting to hear kind of the new people and then also just like people that had sat on the original committee being like, this is going to be a challenge. I also think there's, I said he wants people to come in more, like his ideal, like he always comes up to me and asks why Friday's dead. And I'm like, I don't know, nobody comes in on Fridays. Personally, I love coming in on Fridays. There's no one there. I can get so much work done. I get free lunch. It's great. I love it. There's also like no one on BART. It's just like the whole experience from like door to door is better than on a Wednesday in a different way. But I think that is a challenge we'll continue to face, is that he set an expectation of 2 days, and that's what we've communicated. But in his mind, if you're a good employee, you're coming in like 3 to 4. And I think that that's not necessarily healthy. Like, I think like we should just say what we want. Like, we want you to do this. But I think he is, reading, the industry. I think he feels like 2 days is working for us. So I think there's a lot of challenges, but I think the question, like, how do you get alignment? The neighborhood model was also a super controversial thing. And one thing we did was we did like a rapid document for that. And that was super helpful because I feel like we laid out our recommendation and we let any stakeholder, which was basically our exec team, and then like key partners, IT people, I'm sure there was more, comms, comment on it. And then I think the decision maker, which was our CEO, COO, could kind of take those comments in. And then they asked us to revise it. And then we, we revised it, the decision was made. And I feel like that was super helpful for when people were like, well, why did we do this? You could constantly be like, remember this document. Like we did this whole exercise and it was all documented and their comments were on there. And that was a very helpful kind of tool to use. And I feel like it made people feel like they were heard. but also was very clear on who was making the decision and how it was going to work. So I think that was, we didn't do that when it came to hybrid, but for like neighborhood model, and if I ever had to do like a very large change, like that was very helpful. So
Thank you. And I think it's, again, it's you did. And I think, at the end of the day, the answer is that it is complicated. There are a lot of stakeholders involved in place. And there is, I do think that it's amazing that you've done this documentation and rapid, document. I've seen this work several times as well. And Jen, I'm curious from your perspective, from leading people, right? And there is a talent component to it, right? And you've chose a specific type of flexibility in work model. How does this come into play in terms of talent attraction, right? Because you mentioned, you have majority of employees are remote, you're very flexible. How did you decide to continue with that approach and still continue having remote employees? Mm-hmm. And are you still planning to continue that? And how did this affected, I would say, to loop into what Rebecca mentioned, employee collaboration and engagement?
Okay, Lisa, that was like 8 questions all at once.
I know. I tried.
Yeah, no,
I tried.
I think I got them, at least most of them.
You can choose 2 out of the
8. So let me start by focusing on the talent attraction piece. And what I'll say is, we're a cybersecurity company, so we have a large population of tech workers, both engineers, developers, et cetera, et cetera. What we've found is, in the vast majority of cases, one of the first conversations and questions that our engineering talent and technical talent will ask is, what is your in-office policy? Can I work remotely? Can I not? And what we have found is, because we are remote friendly hybrid, because we're not forcing people to come into the office, a lot of our technical talent leans in and they want to continue the conversation. So for us, having this, sorry, my lights are going off in the office. For us, having this remote friendly hybrid approach has allowed us to attract talent that frankly we might otherwise not have attracted. Let's see. So it's like one piece of that. Lisa, now I'm forgetting the other 7 parts of your question. I'm sorry.
The other part is, how does it affect the employee engagement and collaboration? The fact that you are, you're hiring everywhere, right?
Yep. So I find a lot of times that there's a perception that people who are not showing their face in the office, frequently are unproductive. And I think that's where, let's look to the actual data. Let's take emotion out of it. Let's look to their output, their productivity. Let's also look to our systems, right? Like being remote friendly hybrid, we've had to make sure that we're investing in some of the necessary systems and tools. And then also that we're inclusive in our various types of meetings. I'll give you an example. Often when we have in-person meetings, almost always there is at least one, if not more, members of that meeting who are remote. And so to make sure we have an inclusive experience, we need to be mindful that all of the people who are in the office aren't speaking over each other, because if that's happening and you're the remote person who's dialed in, you can't hear anything. It's just a bunch of garbled, like sound. And so we've had to train our workforce in just being more mindful, around this. And similarly, if you're in person and you're having a meeting that includes people who are dialing in, once the meeting is over, meaning everyone has sort of hung up, those who are in the office need to be mindful that there's not the meeting that continues to happen without the necessary people who need to be a part of it. So, we've had to be very intentional about having just conversations around etiquette and norms when it comes to being highly functional in a remote, friendly type of way. We've found that because our employees love the hybrid approach, they lean into that and they're like, oh yeah, sorry, right? Like that's true, so we've not had an issue once we make our employees aware.
And I think that's also great that employees feel some responsibility to that as well. Like you mentioned, I think it's quite phenomenal. And really focusing, like you mentioned, like on the carrot piece, that this is, this is the policy. If you want to keep it, you need to apply, you need to comply with it and help facilitate that. Rebecca, one last question I would say that would be interesting to hear from one data standpoint, like what would you recommend companies to what data would you recommend companies to collect and look at, and that you see that is interesting in designing a workplace strategy? So I'll start with that question, and I'll not have a multi-part question like I did to Gianna.
Sure. And I think it is essential to collect as much data as feasible. I think you want different sources that you can triangulate. You want those employee engagement surveys, but you also want interviews. And we do a lot of experiments as well and observational studies. And so I think this is a case where more different data can tell very powerful stories and allow you to glean insights from. I think that the biggest untapped source of data right now is what we call collaborative intelligence. And that's essentially information and data about how we're collaborating as an organization, as teams, and how that collaboration changes. We often work with our customers to understand how does their collaboration patterns within their company change if they're in the office versus if they're remote or if they're hybrid. And you see such differences in terms of what happens from a collaboration standpoint when folks are in the office versus when they're not. And in particular, in general, what we see is when people are working remotely, the first type of interaction to break down are those cross-functional interactions, the interactions between the IT teams and the marketing teams. In general, we can do a reasonably good job at maintaining connection and cohesion within our individual teams, but those cross-functional collaboration patterns really, really do suffer. And I don't think they always need to suffer, but again, it's about this intentionality. And if you have data on how those relationships between marketing and sales change as you're in different workplace setups, you can then understand, do you need to invest in more happy hours? Do you need to invest in different configurations in your in-office environment? Do you need to invest in more training in terms of how to conduct hybrid meetings? And so I do think this collaborative intelligence is really the next most important sort of evolution of the future of work. We know that 90% of knowledge workers' time is spent collaborating, and to not understand that pattern and that important source of work is a really missed opportunity.
And just one follow-up question on that is what tools would you recommend using? Because I think that part of the challenge, and you mentioned this, is there is difference between in-person collaboration and virtual collaboration, and the data shows that clearly there is a gap. And what would you recommend, or what do you see companies are using for the digital aspect?
So I'm biased because we often use Asana because it does connect all your teams and all your goals and understanding, the full picture of work. But I've worked with companies where you can glean a ton of information from survey data, asking people, who do you collaborate with? How often do you collaborate? What source of information? We see different people go to different other people for information versus advice versus mentorship versus new work-related opportunities, and asking people who they collaborate with, how often, using what technologies or in person, can often unearth a lot of information that I think leaders aren't often aware of.
Thank you. And we have a few more minutes. I want to answer a few questions from the audience. They're both a bit related to the remote population, I would say. So I would love whoever wants to answer to chime in. But Jesse asks about clarity and expectation setting. What do communications, policy, and expectations for the remote population look like, especially in balance with the office presence and perks? And it also relates to Javela's question, what are the kind of experiences offered for remote employees to create connections? So what do you do with the remote population, I would say, that you all have, and how is it different from the in-office population? How are they being communicated?
Yeah, I'll give some examples to be very specific around some programs that we do.
Yeah.
Not exhaustive, but just to kind of articulate it a little bit better. So we have actually May 17th here at Exabeam, we have our community service day coming up, and we call it ExaCares. And so what we do is, if you are near one of our offices, there are organized events that you wear your Exabeam t-shirt and you go out and you do, it could be a park cleanup, it could be a soup kitchen, it could be any number of activities that typically a few people in the office have organized. And then what we do is, if you are in a remote setting, so let's say we don't have an office in Houston, but we have, if you look at a heat map, we've got a number of people who live in Houston, a number of people who live in Austin, who live in Atlanta, who live in New York, and these are places where we don't have an office. What we do is there's an organizer for ExaCares Day locally in these places where on a heat map we've got 5 or more employees, and they organize something for those people who are in a 30-minute or hour radius to come together and do a community service event. But more so than just the event, it's being able to hang out with your colleagues and coworkers. And what we find is oftentimes people who are we've got, I think, 3 people in the Phoenix, Sedona area in Arizona, and they've self-organized because they want to hang out with each other and participate together. So we help to subsidize those gatherings and meetings. That's an example of something we do. I'll give you another small example. Well, actually 2. If you are remote, you also get to have a stipend to help pay for the various expenses that we're not incurring as an organization, because you're not physically near an office. So that's kind of one of those perks, because they're not getting free lunches, they're not getting a lot of the other benefits that they might have if they were near the office. Programmatically, another thing that's been really well received by our employees is we do these fun contest types of things, where we did a photo contest recently. And so people across the organization, across different countries, were submitting photos that then a committee kind of came up with a curated list of 20 finalists, and then the entire workforce globally voted on those. And then the winners, we had I think 7 or 8 different winners for the most recently pet photo contest. Those are all printed up, and they're over, literally around the corner, right? So it's kind of one of those things where it's like a fun, feel good type of way that our remote folks could participate. I go on and on, but those are kind of some specific examples of how we're trying to be intentional about including the remote people.
What I love about the first and third example there is they were both related to things outside of work, hobbies, volunteering, and that's what we definitely see in the research too, is the more you can build what are sometimes called multiplex relationships for your remote employees, where it's beyond the work itself. It's not scheduling more meetings to talk about work. It's investing in Slack channels about shared hobbies, it's volunteering, it's doing all these things outside of work to recognize the full people that remote workers are, just as in-person workers are, is really important. So I love those 2 examples.
I would say, just to offer a different perspective, I was like, I'm going to let Gianna go first because hers is going to be a little nicer. I think we tend to be an office-centric company. So remote is truly an exception. We didn't really hire remotely during the pandemic. So it was kind of, if you're remote, it's really an exception that's approved, I think, all the way up to our CEO still. So it's kind of an exceptional exception. So we don't do a lot. We have less than 10%. I think we fly them to our offices quarterly. I think for holiday parties, we'll let them come to we'll let them pick a holiday party, but I would say we are also generally willing to relocate them. Like we want them to come live in one of our big hubs. So I think it's a definitely a different perspective. And I will say, I think we've had challenges even in where we have smaller offices. We have 700 employees, 13 offices. So we're like pretty spread out across 7 countries. Where we have smaller offices and we've kind of like questioned whether we needed them. We shut down one. We have seen we've seen people leave. So I definitely think like the cultural aspect is a huge piece. Most of the people I think that we have remote, I don't know, like being remote. And they're usually very specific positions. Not like, I would say they're probably exceptional talent that have gotten an exception. So kind of a different perspective. I would say we do less, and it's kind of like if you want the perks, then I'm not saying I personally
the
agree with
office.
everything. Yeah, come to the office, move
Yeah.
to the Bay Area, move to Seattle. Like, here's some options, we'll help you. So I think that's kind of our strategy. So
And that's a different one, and
Yeah.
and that works, and that works for you. So I think that's really cool to hear. Thank you everyone. We're over time. That has been phenomenal. I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I have. Thank you for phenomenal speakers for sharing different approaches. I hope you've seen that works. And just final thing about Gable, whoever would be interested, we're also happy to offer you a free cost analysis on why you should transition to flexible workspaces through Gable. Thank you everyone for your time. Appreciate that, and see you next time in another episode. Have a great rest of your day. Bye everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.